Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through a perpetually lefty, pinko commie, soy boy cuck, Antifa super soldier filter. But more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig. I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. My tastes range, but mostly exist on opposite ends of the highbrow, lowbrow spectrum. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. I use she, they pronouns. I work in higher ed and run a food pantry. I care about food access, debt, reproductive justice, building a robust social welfare state, and ending the state's domination through the criminal legal system. I'm a staunch defender of horny art, and thus, unlike some overly amplified weenies on the internet, I like movies with sex regardless of whether or not it's central to the plot. Though, I would argue in the movie that is our subject today, it is quite central. So anyway, Craig, what other pop culture are you getting into these days?
Well, it's just a few days till Halloween, and I had an idea that I was going to watch a bunch of Frankenstein adaptations.
Okay.
I made it through two, and I didn't like either of them that much.
Which ones did you dig into?
The first one was like, okay. It's Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the one with De Niro from the early 90s, where De Niro is the monster and Kenneth Branagh is Dr. Frankenstein.
It's so impressive how frequently he directs himself in mediocre films.
I know, right? Yeah. And I think that, like, I just don't like his directing. Like, everything's just real, I mean, it makes sense, but real stagey and showy, and everything just feels theatrical and just feels like a false, I don't want to say false. It just doesn't, I don't connect with, like, his brand of, like,
You're not interested in Murders on the Orient Express?
Nor The Nile. Or The Hauntings of Venice. Is that the next one?
Yes, I believe so.
No, I did not like Murder on the Orient Express at all. Did you see that one?
I did. I just think there's an incongruence between the visual style of the movie and how old, just necessarily from its origin point. But, like, the movie should feel old. Like, it should be shot in a way that doesn't feel so glossy and modern. I don't know. Also, really some stirringly horrible performances in that one. Gal Gadot is
really bad.
Heinous.
Johnny Depp is the guy that gets killed, right? And he's not very good.
Yeah.
Is that him? Am I crazy? I think it's him. It's him or another famous Hollywood
My brain
asshole.
is now doing that thing where I'm like, yes, and then
Murder
it's like, I could just be supplanting.
Express cast. I gotta figure this out. Yeah. He's Edward Ratchet, who I think's the dude that gets killed. Yeah. That's the other part that movie sucks, is because who doesn't want to kill Johnny Depp? that doesn't.
Say, there's no tension. There's no suspense.
Right. The motive is there for everyone.
So what was the other? So you watched Mr. Jerks Off Shakespeare for Fun, Branagh.
Yeah, and again, it's fine. It's incredibly faithful to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, thus the title, Mary Shelley's name being in the title of the movie. The other one I watched is straight dog shit, and that is the Victor Frankenstein.
Is that Aaron Eckhart?
No, that's I, Frankenstein, which I was like, ooh.
You gotta throw it in now.
If I was thinking of it, and because it's famously shit, and I watched Victor Frankenstein, I was like, nah, I can't. I'm not going to do another one of these that I know are shitty.
Even for the bit, it's too far.
Yeah. Do you know who wrote Victor Frankenstein, which I forgot about till halfway through, and then I was like, oh, no wonder this sucks.
I did not prior to seeing your notes, so I will allow you to maintain the suspense.
It's, like King Nepo baby of Hollywood, Max Landis, one of the oh god, he is the worst.
As if his father has not inflicted enough on us.
I would rather get my head chopped off by a helicopter than watch another Max Landis movie. It's terrible, and I am like perversely fascinated with Max Landis, though I do follow his career fairly closely because I think he's a goon and I love it.
I mean, it is a very piercing example of someone failing upward. I mean,
Constantly.
just where it is so explicitly driven by familial connection and nepotism.
And the fact that he will not acknowledge that and thinks that he is like God's gift to cinema is also a part of his career that I love. Do you know his famous tweet about his Lord of the Rings? I love this so much.
Ugh.
He did a tweet one time. He did a tweet. he tweeted once that like it was long before the movie came out, and he wrote like, just finished writing my script for It's Crazy to Think What Could Be My Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. And the movie came out, and it was that fucking movie Bright? Where Will Smith plays a cop who has an orc partner. I was like, God damn, what an asshole. I did not forget that tweet, because I was like, when I saw it, I was like, this movie's going to suck. I cannot wait to watch it to verify.
I'm trying to think of a joke here that's like the classic George W. Bush, the quote about George W. Bush, where it's like he was born on third and
thinks he hit a home run.
Yeah, or thinks he hit a triple.
Yeah.
And it's like he, he thinks he hit a Tolkien,
but he hit a.
But he got handed a book from a bargain.
A racist
sale
orc cop movie. That was like also like
the joke is ill-formed, but the spirit's there.
Jesus, I hated that movie so much. And it was like around the time when Black Lives Matter was like first, that term was first coined or whatever. And there's a joke early on in the movie where Will Smith kills a fairy. Like there's fairies that are like nuisances, I guess. Did you ever see that movie? It's so stupid.
I did not. I can't say that I did.
It's basically like the movie's like.
I mean, I know the premise of it.
Modern time just had medieval Tolkien shit in it.
Yeah, it's like Zootopia for adults.
Yeah,
right.
And the sloths are goddamn orcs that everyone else.
Right.
But there's one where like he kills a fairy, and fairies in the movie, if I remember, are like annoying. They're like nuisances, and Will Smith goes, "Fairy lives don't matter," or something like that. That was like clearly like a Black Lives Matter thing. That movie sucks. But Victor Frankenstein.
Trenchant analysis.
Victor Frankenstein's terrible. It's told mostly from the point like Igor's perspective, which is like interesting, played by Daniel Radcliffe.
Yes. Okay.
And
there are bells being rung in my head.
And Victor Frankenstein is played by James McAvoy, which is like whatever.
Oh, look at all these men laid on the good, like good actors laid on the altar,
and they're fine in it. The movie's just terrible. And also the part that's like truly heinous when you make a Frankenstein movie is like it feels like Marvel-fied, where like there has to be a big like boss fight at the end, and it's just. The whole movie is the build-up to creating Frankenstein, and then the last 10 minutes are Frankenstein's alive, and they have to fight him. Am I wrong? But like, isn't the interesting part of Frankenstein like the part where everyone realizes what a mistake they've made, and then like you live in that for a while?
The challenging of like definitions of humanity is the interesting part about it. Yeah. Both reflected on Dr. Frankenstein of, are you playing God?
Right.
And does a human have the capacity to like positively create life? Right. And then also on the Frankenstein's monster side of things of, is it possible for like basically a facsimile of a human to achieve humanity? Yeah. If you spend all of the movie getting there, you totally lose those themes.
Literally the last 10 minutes is they create a Frankenstein. It looks like shit, by the way. The one thing they could have done right was make a cool looking Frankenstein. It's like a mix of it looks like a rubber mask at a like Spirit Halloween. It's terrible. God, I just hated this movie so much. It took me like 3 days to watch it too, because I just couldn't sit down and watch it.
To be fair, the man who directed it has not made very many movies post.
What's his name? It was some. I looked him up too, and it was.
His name is Paul McGugan.
Yeah, it's a
McGuigan. He previously directed Push, which I liked all right. That's the movie. It's kind of like a superhero movie that stars Chris Evans and Dakota Fanning.
Oh, okay. I vaguely remember this.
And Jimon Hansu. Again, I'm not saying it's great, but it is all right. And then Lucky Number 11, which is fun.
That was the first movie my wife and I saw on a date.
Wow.
Nope, that's wrong. It was the second movie we saw on a date.
But still, part of y'all's trajectory. Yeah. So you got to give him some props.
Yeah, that's the
baseline for the
our relationship is a McGuigan original. The first movie we saw was Thank You for Smoking.
Definitely better than Victor Frankenstein, for sure.
Ugh.
But also Wicker Park, which I know many people have feelings about, but I think it's
I
fine.
never saw Wicker Park. I didn't realize he directed that.
Yeah,
That's
it's solid, I think.
Josh.
Josh Hartnett.
Hartnett, yeah.
Yeah, some people may hear that and go, "What the fuck are you talking about, Hal?" But I stand by it.
But the other thing I want to talk about, and I'll be very brief because who wants to hear a dork rattle about video games? But
Greg's Video Game Corner.
Yeah, the new Spider-Man video game came out, and it's dope as shit. So have you followed any of the Spider-Man games?
I have not, but I have seen people on Twitter talking about the game play and how it is fun mechanically, but makes no sense in terms of the character. Maybe I might be mischaracterizing, but that is kind of, as someone who's not played the game at all, like what my general assessment of the discourse that I have seen thus far.
Yeah. I'm early on, so I don't know. Maybe it goes sideways, but I like it so far as like the characters go. But the gameplay is super fun. It's one of the only like open world games where it's fun to travel. Like, that's kind of annoying in games where, like, oh, God damn it, I got to get on a horse and drive for 5 minutes. But this, like, I could whip around New York for hours. It's super fun. Just zip, zip, zip. But it's also a fucking awesome Spider-Man story. Or at least they have been. So this one is technically the
Peter
third
Parker
one. It's both.
Or
so the first game they made
Miles?
was just called Spider-Man.
Okay.
The second one was, and it was Peter Parker. The second one was Spider-Man Miles Morales, and it was Miles Morales. This one is now they're both fully Spider-Men working together to protect New York, and you switch off playing Peter Parker and Miles.
It is one of my
Spider-Man.
favorite bits of all time that anyone can do, which is to say a word that has man at the end of it and say it like
Like a last
Spider-Man.
name. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Batman,
like
Superman.
Batman.
Yeah.
It just always gets me
100%
100% of the time.
But it's fun as hell. I like it. What about you? What you been getting into?
So, since it's spooky season, I am not doing my 30 horror movies in 30 days like I have done the last couple of years. I just don't have the full spooky spirit, and I've been really busy. But I did want to make sure that I rewatched one of my favorite movies, and in fact, upon this viewing, I bumped it up to one of my top 4
Hell
on
yeah.
Letterboxd.
Oh boy.
And it was probably, I would say, the 6th or 7th time I've watched it.
Okay.
And that is Suspiria 2018.
Yeah. That movie's awesome.
I fucking love that movie. That movie sings to the deep recesses of my soul on several levels.
Hell yeah.
There's like aspects of it that can be absolutely incomprehensible if you don't have some sense of the political environment that it's situated in the late 70s. But it has body horror elements.
Yeah, it does. That fucking one scene, that dance scene. Oh, there's a lot of dance scenes, but the one where she gets all fucking pretzeled up is disgusting.
I love that it uses contemporary dance as its subject instead of
the original's like ballet.
Is ballet. Yeah, shifting it from ballet. Tilda Swinton is iconic on every level in every role. Dakota Johnson, who I generally don't have very warm feelings about as a performer. I do think she's someone that uses her nepotism for good, at least socially, like
calling out Ellen.
When she called out Ellen DeGeneres, like, thank you. Yes, use your, because someone that doesn't have nepotism backing them is afraid to do things like that, and she's like, nah, Ellen's a dick, and I'm gonna let her know, and I'm gonna use the fact that my parents are both famous to buoy me through this moment. But yeah, I think that usually I would say the thing that I don't love about the movie is the Tom York score.
Oh, okay.
I think it really deserves like an orchestral 70s moment.
I don't remember it that well.
It's not super duper prominent, except at the beginning and the end there are songs that he like sings in.
Oh, that's weird.
That I just don't love. It just takes me out of it, and like so much of the movie is about women and femininity, and also using that as an analogy for the motherland.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it should be a fucking dude
Yeah.
singing.
Yeah.
I just don't think it should be.
Is
I don't
it
like
just Tom York, or did he do it with that other Radiohead guy that does a lot of scores?
Greenwood?
Yeah.
I believe it's just credited as Tom York. But again, it's not horrible. It's just in a movie that I love so much of, it's not my favorite. And it just like reinvigorates. It makes me, I did not watch it immediately, but it makes me want to revisit Bones and All.
I still haven't seen that one. I got to see that one.
Yes, I do recommend watching it, and I want to visit it again. But I just think I like when directors who are not predominantly horror directors choose to use their skills and play in genre conventions that are outside their standards.
Ganja Hess.
Yes, like Ganja Hess. So yeah, I love Suspiria 2018. I think that there's a lot to dig into. To me, the movie is about late modernity and how like technocratic organization of society and governments represent a fracturing of the old way.
Yeah.
And that as the new way is born, there are like perversities that crawl out of that gap. Yeah. And the movie, like, to me, totally works on that level. And then it also just totally works on the level of fucking weird, gross witches in a dance school, you know? So, obsessed.
Also, if I remember correctly, it reveals pretty early that it's witches, right? Whereas the original holds that until, like, almost, like, you get a sense, but it holds back until, like, the reveal, basically.
Right, that's the twist.
Yeah.
The twist is in, which I won't like say outright in terms of like spoilers, but just generally is more about the characters that we've been following, what their relationship is to the tumult, like to the fact that there is some grand transformation taking place, like what their relationship is to it is, I think, where the suspension or tension comes in, as opposed to just like, are they witches or not? Like we learn rightly quick that that's what's going on there. The other thing I want to raise is I recently read On Human Slaughter, which is a collection of articles published by Elizabeth Bruning in The Atlantic. I'll say up top, some people who listen to this, you know, like Elizabeth Bruning is a little bit or a lot bit of a controversial figure.
I know the name, but I don't know.
She is I'm going to use the phrase pro-life here in quotes. Usually I would just call the person anti-choice.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that she is anti-choice because she doesn't advocate for abortion bans.
Okay.
But basically she converted to Catholicism in her 20s.
That's a weird time.
It is. Yeah. And I am not defending that. But she has, in the last 10 years or so, from a journalistic perspective, done a lot of rich writing on the death penalty in the United States. Okay. And On Human Slaughter is a collection of articles about her attending state murders of people. Okay. And about failures of the lethal injection process.
Oh,
like what was happening in Alabama is happening in Alabama repeatedly.
That's where they like can't get the right drugs, so they're just using
they can't get the right drugs, so they're using like these weird
like Clorox,
arbitrary mixtures. They're taking hours and hours and hours to try and kill people to the point where like they have bruises all over their body and holes all over them, and then canceling. So these men believe that they're going to die, and then spend hours essentially being medically tortured, and then aren't killed. Crazy. So. Again, I'm not defending her in general. But I do think she puts forth some interesting and compelling journalistic writing and investigations. And this is a collection of her, over the last like year and a half, published articles in The Atlantic about specifically lethal injection and the failures of the state.
Yeah, that sounds dope.
And so... I definitely recommend it for people that are, I wouldn't say like grappling, but I would hope everyone listening to this is against the death penalty. But in terms of understanding like where things are currently at, I would say like that was maybe something I was not up on. And it is gripping and horrifying.
Yeah. I got lectured by a Catholic one time for being both pro-choice and anti-death penalty. It was at a Halloween party.
Fetuses are not humans, so.
True. I was this Halloween party was
pretty
like
simple to me.
It was like 2010, and the tea party was a new phenomenon. So I went as like a tea partier, which meant I just dressed like a dork and wore a tricorner hat. But then I made a bunch of like signs that were inherently contradictory.
Keep your government hands off my Medicare.
So one was like, I had a sign that said like, "All life is precious," and it had like a little fetus, and the other one had an electric chair, and it said, "Kill them all and let God sort them out." So I would just walk around with like these two opposing, and then this friend of my parents cornered me at the party and was like, "Let me talk to you about those signs." And I was like, "Oh God,
let me talk to you."
Let me talk to you. Yeah. Anyways, what about current events? What's going on in the world that's either got you celebrating or in despair?
Have you seen this Scholastic Book Fair business?
Yes.
Those
idiots.
I knew that given your profession that you would probably have dipped your toe in this, but so I saw it circulating on Twitter, aka X, whatever, and then
Twix.
I read Twix. Yes, that's a good portmanteau.
RM Brown on YouTube. I heard come up with that one.
Okay, well, hat nod, hat tip to him. And then I also, a couple of days ago, read an article by Rebecca Onion that was on Slate about the Scholastic Book Fair business. So basically, teachers were reporting that as part of across many different schools, as part of arranging their events or the Scholastic Book Fair at their respective schools, that the Scholastic Book Fair sent out request forms that allowed schools to opt out of receiving books that could be classified as pertaining to diversity or inclusion. So kind of the initial wave of this is like teachers being like, yo, what the fuck? Why is this a separate, like, siloed thing happening here? And then Scholastic Book Fair responded and indicated that their packages incorporate those books throughout, right? Like, it's not like there's no non-white people elsewhere in their packages.
Right.
But that the selection people were discussing was crafted to allow schools and states like Florida to participate without jeopardizing staff. Now, the issue at hand in general obviously causes despair for me, right? Like, we're talking about book banning and squelching dissent, and it's never good to limit what children can read. Like, I just don't believe that on any level. So this as a continuation of the book banning foolishness is bad. But also, it kind of made me think about how we often end up as leftists defending positions or people or businesses, etc., that otherwise would not really warrant a principled defense.
Right.
Because the right gets to set the terms of the debate. So, in this instance, the Scholastic Book Fair becomes a stand-in for issues of diversity and inclusion. But as Rebecca Onion points out in her article, the Scholastic Book Fair is like at this point mostly like non-book, like trinkets and tchotchkes and stuff.
Posters of Ferraris.
Yeah, it's also like, if we take a step back in terms of what warrants a principled defense, it's not like a collective resource like a library, and it's not equitable. Like, it's a thing that people have to spend money at, so there's a whole swath of kids that just, like, by definition are excluded from it in the first place.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was like an interesting example of, like, on first round, my hackles are up, and it still is. They shouldn't, fuck Florida.
For real.
I don't think, right? I think that's clear on every level that we don't think book banning is good. But it just did make me reflect on, like, what do we, as, like, leftists or as people engaged in collective action of some form, find ourselves, like, engaged in or having to engage in defense of, when, like, really that thing doesn't really speak to our core principles. It's just because it's, like, the current frontier of bullshit that the right has decided to
that Little Mermaid movie looked like dog shit, but now I'm out here trying to be like, hey, I bet it's decent enough because these right-wingers are Right,
it's like, I think sometimes this comes up with, like, Marvel stuff too, right? Where it's like,
I don't want to defend a goddamn Marvel movie, but, like,
right,
I guess I will if you're going to be mad that there's, like, a black Captain America or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So I thought it was an interesting example of this kind of phenomenon that I feel like has become more and more relevant as the right continues to push their line forward, and claim more and more space, and we're just like left on the back foot having arguments about shit that is not like fundamentally tied into the beliefs we most stringently hold. It's just like the easiest version of it and the most vile version that they've pushed in front of our faces.
Yeah. Goddamn Scholastic Book Fair.
Goddamn Scholastic Book Fair. How about you?
Well, I have a silly thing that I want to talk about, but first I do want to touch on something that we mentioned very briefly, because last time we recorded it had like just popped off, and I think you said something very briefly, but I feel weird if we don't mention it. So I just want to put my perspective really quick, and I wrote it down because I just don't want to fuck up and say something. But when we recorded the last episode, the events were very fresh, and neither of us wanted to say too much until we heard more. But I just want to say what's going on in Gaza at the moment is heartbreaking, and my own thoughts on the matter, because a lot of people are saying both intelligent and extremely stupid things in public and in private. I believe that two things are of the utmost importance, and all other points of discussion are irrelevant until, one, there's a ceasefire on the indeterminate slaughter of captive population in Gaza, and two, there is freedom for the Palestinian people. And I think until those things happen, all other concerns or worries are basically secondary and stem from one and two. So yeah, that's just basically, I just feel weird not saying something about it because it's super fucked up. And
yeah, I'm with you. You can't put conditions on people's freedom.
Yeah.
And when the terms of the debate are until XYZ, what you're doing is using, like you said, a captive population people as a bargaining chip instead of like recognizing their full humanity.
Yeah.
So full stop.
Anyway, so now on to the silly thing that I want to talk about, which is actually brought to me by you, because I did not know until you had tweeted me, not tweeted, God damn, I keep saying tweeted for everything, until you texted me a link to an article, and I am both ironically and unironically celebrating because Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire are at it again, and this time they're making a goddamn Snow White movie to combat, I guess, the woke Snow White that they all hate.
I
oh my God.
Also kind of genuinely am excited for this because I feel like it's going to give us a lot of fodder.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's going to be a lot of meat on that bone to chew on.
And the part I'm extra excited about is this is the first one starring in-house Daily Wire talent, because the lead actress is Brett Cooper, who's this like failed Gen Z actress who like, oh my God, there needs to be like a chart just tracking the failed actor to like right-wing grifter transition, because it's like all of them. But she was just an actress. I think she appeared on, there's some bullshit shows that she just was like on a couple episodes of, and then just got hired by the Daily Wire. And also she looks exactly like Ben Shapiro is the part that is the most funny. Is she looks identical to Ben Shapiro, and she does a show that's supposed to be like the Gen Z show on the Daily Wire, which is also really funny because they try to make it look like a Twitch live stream with like comments, but it's all pre-recorded.
Okay, whoa. She was in the Heathers show that they tried to do.
Yeah, she was. She was in that.
Paramount Plus tried to do.
Yeah. And she was in some other dumb shit that I never saw the Heathers show. I don't know if it sucked or not, but
it was not great. Tonally, it was weird.
Have you seen the little teaser they put out?
Yes, I sent it to you.
Okay.
That's what I sent.
You sent me the article that had the teaser in it, so I didn't know if you watched it, but like I got so happy because like, well, now let me be careful with my words because I don't want to be mean to this person. You know, she's a very lovely looking young woman. She looks like dog shit in this trailer. Like she is caked the makeup on her face. So the trailer is like a teaser with just like forest creatures, and then the last spot is like Brett Cooper as Snow White from behind, and she turns to the camera, and I laughed out loud at the face reveal because it is like kabuki makeup white face on her, and I was like, holy shit, this is going to be awesome.
What is happening?
They couldn't even get the makeup right, so this movie is going to be wild. But also this is now, they're going to be their first movie under their Bent IP streaming platform, which is like, they were just called like Daily Wire Plus, and now they're calling it.
You think it might be marginally harder for us to torrent it?
No, we'll be all right.
It's on their proprietary.
Because it already was proprietary at Daily Wire Plus. They just changed the name. Yeah.
Okay.
All the other ones were like behind the paywall too.
We will be watching that allegedly illegally for free.
Yeah, illegally.
Let's keep it alleged. Let's keep it alleged.
But yeah, it's now the Daily Wire's like streaming service, which they've been getting a lot of shit recently for, because their like first show is like some fucking chinchilla, the fucking some or another, but it looks exactly.
Wait, what?
It's a like animated show for kids.
Okay, and it features a chinchilla.
Yeah, it's like Chinchilla the fucking something, like, well, just a dumb like kids thing with like animals as whatever, but it looks exactly like that kids show Bluey. Yes. If you look at it, it's like a 1-to-1. They just made Bluey into a chinchilla. So they've been getting a lot of shit for that. But
I'm a little bummed. Chinchilla is a nickname that my dad calls me because there's this is a while ago now, so assumedly he's no longer playing, but there was like an Italian soccer player who played for like the Italian national team whose last name was Chinchilla, and I don't know, our last name just kind of, if you're doing the like Cockney free association, Cockney rhyme or whatever, it kind of could be Chinchilla. So he calls me that. So
this one's called Chipchilla.
Okay.
So anyways, but I'm very excited for this bullshit Snow White movie they're doing. I hope. Look forward to that someday in the future, listeners. I hope Ben Shapiro plays a dwarf.
Definitely be covering it.
That would be awesome. Ben Shapiro needs to be in these movies. I'm sick of this bullshit of Ben Shapiro not being in these dumb movies.
I guarantee you at some point in time he was on set for one of them and he had lines, and then his squeaky ass chipmunk voice, and they were like, no,
I want him in the Snow White movie.
You should probably not take apples from strangers. That is something that your feelings are telling you to do, but let me give you the facts on taking apples from strangers.
He could be a dwarf.
That's what I want him as. I want him as Doc, the professorial, annoying ass dwarf.
So, speaking of the undead,
yes,
we have a return to our top 3 segment. And today, in light of the movie we're covering, Ganja Hess, we're going to talk about our top 3 vampire movies, which was very hard for me because I love a vampire.
Me too.
I love a vampire.
I also like making dumb arbitrary rules for myself when we do this to like, I think honestly what it is to narrow down the selection a little bit. So when I did it, I thought, okay, I don't want to do any movies with Dracula lore are out for me.
Oh, okay. Well,
so and I think I did. Okay, I think technically Only Lovers Left Alive might like reference, because it's all like, spoiler alert for one of my movies. But I think because there's like a lot of references to like the olden times and like vampires before them.
Your first choice relates.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
So just not the most explicit.
I guess I'm not going for like I didn't go for like explicitly Dracula lore stories.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Yes. So you want to bring us in with your number 3?
Yeah, my number 3 is Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark. I think I've also realized I love a vampire movie about like the just malaise of being an immortal being and just like.
Right, like what does it experientially actually look like
and like
to be alive forever? And
just like characters that are like, God, this is fucked up, and like we're just gonna live with that. Also, Near Dark is like the absolute peak of Bill Paxton being cool as shit. I mean, he is cool as shit a lot of times in his career, but Near Dark, he is really cool.
He also sometimes plays, I wouldn't call it dweeby exactly, but I think about like, he just is like simmering in Near Dark in a way that is not true in some of his other roles.
Yeah, and he's got the leather jacket, and in the bar fight, he's got the blood running down his face and the little quippy lines. I love him in that, and it's just a cool movie. What about you? What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which came out in 1992. As I've said so many times before, I like a big picture. picture, something that just like the production design is labored over. It's ginormous. It's a huge presence on screen. Iko Ishioka's costuming in the movie is bonkers.
Yeah, that movie's awesome.
Dracula's armor alone, is like one of the best looks in a film of all time, in my opinion. Just like evoking, this kind of like medieval positioning in that it's armor and the kind of shape of it, but doing something that is so visceral and looks like muscle and also is like futuristic in its styling. Just wow. And it's fucking feral. That movie is
it's crazy.
wildly sexual. That will be, so that's not intentionally, but incidentally, whatever, is I would say the theme of my top 3 is just like vampires being sexually insane, feral, and the hunger and desire of immortality. Like if you just can't die, your hunger is ceaseless. It spans across time and space and knows no end. So my third is Bram Stoker's Dracula. What's your number 2?
That's a great segue about no end and ceaseless, except with my number 2, it's more about just how like the mundaneness of immortality is unending and ceaseless, and that's Only Lovers Left Alive, which I believe is a movie that we've talked about that you did not like.
We have.
Right?
I don't like this movie.
Yeah.
It's I find it to be boring.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, this is the like Malaise vampire movie of just like lounging about and being like, God damn it, what the fuck?
I mean,
am I
Tilda
doing?
looks really hot in
she's
it. Cool. But yeah, it's not my favorite movie for that reason.
I don't love what's his nuts.
Taylor
Hiddleston.
Swift's. Yeah.
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift's
but I like him in this a lot. And I also love Mia Wasikowska, who is great in this movie. But yeah, it's basically like it takes place in Detroit, and it's these two vampires, Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston, who have been in love for forever, but have been apart and then come together again. And they're both kind of like depressives because of like
definitely melancholia. Like
yeah. But yeah, it's just a cool like you just kind of lay in this weird place.
And I would say, like, this is a great example of what we were talking about a few minutes ago with, like, Luca and Suspiria, like, of someone who usually doesn't make horror movies making a horror movie, where Jim Jarmusch, that even though he then made the zombie movie,
which did you like that one
more than
because I didn't
Only
like
Lovers
that
Left
one.
Alive,
I
would say.
So we're swipped on that
but
one.
I also
said
like Adam Driver, and I thought Adam Driver was really good in Only the Dead. What's the name of that one?
Only the Dead Die. The dead. Only death.
Yeah,
only
we'll clarify that in a moment.
Death.
But it's something like that. But I just am not, as I said with Bram Stoker's Dracula, I like big shit, and
this is not a big shit. This is this is quiet and subdued.
In general is just like people sitting around and talking, which can be fine. Like, there are examples of that I love. I mean, a couple of episodes ago I talked about Abel Ferrara's The Addiction, which is a vampire movie, and I did like it, but I've only seen it once, so I don't say that it like rises to enter it. But that's an example of a movie where it's a lot of people just sitting around and talking, but it's done in black and white, and the visual is really like stunning still. I just feel like Jim Jarmusch a lot of the time is just not bringing it for me. It's just not my cup of tea.
I will say it also has a great like small cameo performance, and one of his last, I think, but from John Hurt, who plays Marlowe of not ancient but English literature fame, which is a cool moment. What about you? What's your number 2?
Mine is Werner Herzog's 1979 film Nosferatu the Vampire.
Oh yeah, I've only seen it once and a long time ago, and I've been meaning to watch it again.
I mean, I love a Herzog moment, of course.
Love it.
And both lead performances in it by Kinski as Nosferatu and Isabella Adjani as, the target of his, his prey, the target of his affection, are great. But part of the reason why I love it so much is because I find it to be an actually haunting, like, frightening movie. Like, the way Kinski moves as Nosferatu does not come off as like clownish or like impish to me. Like, it is actually
menacing.
frightening and menacing. And I think it achieves that more effectively than other Nosferatu editions or iterations. Yeah.
Hell yeah. And I love those two together because I like knowing that one of them was close to killing the other when they were
well, that's why it's part of it is such an amazing performance to me on Kinsey's part, because so many of his other movies, or so many of Herzog's movies that he's in, he is playing bombastic, right? Like Aguirre, The Wrath of God,
and
when you hear that on the set, they're at each other's throats, he's about to fucking throw him off a boat, you're like, well, he's playing like a megalomaniacal psycho. This is reserved and pitiful. Like, he is almost pathetic, but there's a menacing undercurrent that it makes me go like, oh wow, he was like a much more talented actor than if you only look at his larger than life roles. They don't reveal enough about him or his capacity as an actor.
Have you ever seen My Best Fiend?
I have.
Yeah,
yes.
That's great. For those who might not know, it's a documentary about the making of Fitzcarraldo, which was a Klaus Kinski, Werner Herzog movie where they literally did almost kill each other.
And also, like, maybe just we're going to die anyway.
They were going to die either by trying to make this movie or by literally murdering one another.
Like the physical mechanics of the movie and their relationship were both at odds with their survival.
Have you ever heard Werner Herzog talk about why he loves cows? It's a great quote. The enormity of their flat brains. He talks about like how stupid cows are and that he finds beauty in that. And he's basically, you look into a cow's eyes and the vacuous stupidity is overwhelming. It's very funny. But that's a good segue because my number one is Shadow of the Vampire, which is loosely tied into Nosferatu the Vampire. Shadow the Vampire, starring Willem Dafoe in an awesome performance, is a movie about the making of Nosferatu, except the general conceit is what if Max Schreck, the guy who originally played Nosferatu, was actually a vampire. Yeah, and so like it is the making of Nosferatu, like the behind the scenes stuff, except that Willem Dafoe as Max Schreck is in fact a vampire, and it works on like a bunch of different levels. Is very interesting, and John Malkovich is, I think we've even talked about this on the pod before, but John Malkovich plays F.W. Murnau. I have
not seen it, and
cool.
I need to rectify that.
I can let you borrow it if I have it, but I don't know if I have it. We'll look later, but it's really cool. Oh look!
Oh my god!
It's happening now. I'm pulling it.
Oh,
there goes another one. There you go.
Thank you. I'll bring it back on Saturday. Love it. Excited.
What about you? What's your number one?
My number one is also, I would say this is up there for me and one of my favorite movies of all time. It is Tony Scott's 1983 The Hunger. This movie is, I think, the sexiest movie ever made.
Hell yeah.
Maybe. I am kind of obsessed with Catherine Deneuve.
Love her too.
And she is just, a revelation in this movie. Her and Susan Sarandon's like sex scene where there's like curtains, there's just so much fabric like streaming through the room. It looks like a fucking Celine Dion music video.
Like The Room, Tommy Wiseau.
Oh my god, yes.
A lot of curtains
just
in that
like
sex scene.
Except one's sexual organs don't turn inside yourself
while
watching it.
No belly button intercourse.
And like David Bowie's brief turn in it, and the Depeche Mode, like the opening scene is just it is a movie that somehow, how do I say this? I feel like some movies are just vibes, right? Mm-hmm. Like that is what the director is attempting, is just like, I'm here to present a set of feelings and moods, and the visuals accompany that. Somehow The Hunger is a full ass vibe movie while also just being like a good vampire movie.
I need to see that. I've never seen that. That's been on my list for a while.
Oh my God, you have this is an invective. If you have not seen The Hunger, go watch it.
This is
if you are listening to this, go stop listening to us and go watch
it's a call
The
to
Hunger
action, folks.
Right now. For a while, it was on Max. I don't know if it still is, but
so Depeche Mode does the music.
There's just like a lot of like that kind of 80s goth synthy like some post-punk stuff music in it. But the opening scene is them like in a goth club.
Oh, cool.
And then you see like the start of a sexual interaction where Bowie and Catherine Deneuve's characters have like latched on to prey to bring back to their house, which is also exquisite and beautiful.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that. I gotta get that one.
Gorgeous, sexy, everything. Watch it.
Hell yeah. Okay. Well, are you ready to get into the movie proper? The reason we've gathered here today.
Dearly beloved.
Yes, indeed. We're here to talk about Ganja and Hess.
Ganja and Hess.
Do you want to give us a little background on it? A little context?
Yeah, context. I'm not quite sure. That's an interesting way to describe what I've written here today. So, as I sat down to write an intro for this episode, I was thinking that I was going to head in the direction of like post-colonial psychology. So, I started re-engaging some of The Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin, White Masks, both of which are writings by Frantz Fanon, which kind of sent me down a trail of the facticity of blackness, which is about how definitions of self are forged by the colonial gaze and how a sense of racial identity is generated from a look by the colonizer targeting the colonized, which destabilizes the colonized. Basically, under the watchful eye of the colonizer, the colonized self is distorted and undermined. This concept is contingent on Fanon's borrowing and refashioning of Lacan's mirror stage. The mirror stage is a period of psychological development in which the subject moves from only seeing oneself in disconnected fragments, like how a baby looking outward only sees its arms and its legs, right, separate from its whole self, and moves to seeing oneself, the self even, as centered and whole. Within the mirror phase, Lacan and then Fanon propose that the development of a self is achieved by looking upon another and relating to it. Thus, developing a notion or a sense of an I is dependent upon and occurs through its reflection back in another person. Fanon sees that in the context of colonial relations, the mirror stage can be distorted when an encounter with another person instead thrusts the subject back into a fragmented partial sense of the self, and thus the other, like capital O, the other, not just another, is read as a threat, an objection, an unassimilatable monster that does not facilitate or affirm wholeness. So, what should be a conciliatory encounter with another becomes a confrontation with a threat, and the perceived threat is denied full personhood. As Fanon wrote in Black Skin, White Masks on page 109, the colonized are, quote, sealed into crushing objecthood, unquote, and denied subjectivity. And colonizers desire difference, such as the difference between a whole relatable, both metaphysically and psychologically, perhaps even spiritually, subject, and a mutilated, defective object lacking complexity, who is knowable and easily defined in its difference, its lack of humanness. Because difference is a wedge. Difference is a justification. Difference is a provocation, even, for whatever cruelty came before and whatever brutality comes next. And what is a vampire, if not a being cursed to a half-life of near human adjacency? As Chicago-based filmmaker and writer Harrison Sherrod, in his book chapter on Ganja and Hess in the 2016 collection, Beyond Exploitation, says, vampirism designates a viral colonization of the body and a denial of one's ontological status as a human. That is, a realization of the demagogic germ rhetoric wielded against blacks throughout history. Now, if you followed that, bravo, because listener, I got lost fully in the motherfucking sauce. And if you didn't follow it, Basically, my intention is to continue building off the ideas we started to introduce in our Nightmare on Elm Street 2 Freddy's Revenge episode about the queer monstrous. Film in general, but specifically the horror genre, allows us to engage with systems of domination by reimagining through metaphor and presenting them in new forms for us to grapple with. So, Craig, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this movie was almost lost to time?
Yeah, so we're talking about 1973's Ganja Hess, which was kind of considered it was considered a blaxploitation movie, but it didn't necessarily tick all the boxes of what made a blaxploitation movie in the eyes of audiences. So Ganja Hess, as we watch it in 2023, the year of our Lord, almost did not exist at all. So with 1971's Shaft and 1972's Superfly, as well as the early 70s films of Melvin Van Peebles, blaxploitation film had become a recipe for moderate success for mid to low budget studios. Basically, they knew there was a kind of a baked in audience that was going to go. You could make it for cheap, and you were going to turn a profit. So film producers Quentin Kelly and Jack Jordan were these two fledgling producers who saw the recent success of black films and began purchasing scripts from black authors, including Maya Angelou and James Baldwin. When American International Pictures, a subsidiary of MGM, which I accidentally put in my notes as GMG, was slated to release Blackula, a vampire-themed blaxploitation movie, other studios were eager to jump on that money train, including Kelly and Jordan, who hired writer, director, and all-around artiste Bill Gunn to write and direct a vampire movie that would compete with Blackula. During filming, Kelly and the other producer, Jordan, were just not involved, so Gunn was kind of able to have complete creative control. However, when the film premiered in 1973, early reviews were unkind at best and just pretty much straight up racist at worst. A lot of this information that I got comes from a really good essay written by a guy named Brian Eggert for Deep Focus Review. And in his review, he pulls one such review from the New York Times at the time, which dismissed the film, calling it meant to be derisive, black-oriented, and ineffectually arty, and condemned it for its confusingly vague melange of symbolism, violence, and sex. But the truth was, white audiences were more than willing to engage in black stories when the black characters fit their preconceived notion of black men in America. But white audiences were less willing to engage with a black protagonist who was more handsome, more sophisticated, and more cultured than they were. And just 3 days after its theater release, Kelly and Jordan pulled the film, cut it from Bill Gunn's original 113 minutes down to just 78, and removed all of the ineffectually arty parts, and reissued the film under the title Blood Couple, where it basically died into obscurity and was kind of just this forgotten relic of the 70s. However, a print of the original was donated to the Museum of Modern Art, and for years the MoMA hosted screenings of the uncut version, kind of cementing its legacy as a cult classic that's kind of hard to find. However, in the early 2010s, the Museum of Modern Art, with the help of the Film Foundation, restored Bill Gunn's original 113-minute film, and for the first time in 40 years, Ganja Hess was easily accessible, uncut, and complete to Bill Gunn's original vision. So yeah, kind of a really interesting story on this one I'm always interested in those stories that almost die to the sands of time or whatever reason, and then eventually find this restoration. But yeah, until we watched this and I started reading about it, I was not even aware that this film almost didn't exist anymore. Yeah, were you aware of this? Its adventure to the screen?
I was not. I mean, I had some knowledge of the fact that it was not well received at the time. It was produced in the context of the blaxploitation genre, but that while it does use some conventions of the blaxploitation genre, I would say particularly when we see Hess engaging with a sex worker. And in the kind of dive bar, right? Like that kind of scene is very much written like a blaxploitation scene where he walks in and there's a large group of men who are all, quote unquote, like talk and jive and like threatening him. That segment feels like it's pulled from Coffee, or something.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, particularly in the way it is directed, has much more in common with something like, speaking of other vampire movies, which I didn't include in the list, but I do quite love, like Jean Rollins, or Rollin maybe is how you pronounce his name, the like French director who's made a bunch of kind of arty vampire movies,
cool.
like Fascination.
Or
Lips of Death, I think is the other. I'll look. Lips
Great
of Blood.
title.
Sorry, Lips of Blood. But the movie is directed in most parts in a way that I would say is more in line with kind of like European art films of the time. So it's not shocking to me to learn that it had a bit of a rocky road.
Yeah. And I think probably being the 70s and Bill Gunn being a queer man in the 70s, and also kind of being unapologetic in the way I feel like he presents the male body in this as well, maybe did not make it as open to audiences who were there strictly for like the ass kicking elements of like typical blaxploitation movies and things like that.
I would say that audience expectation matters a lot. Like most people, maybe I'm just totally projecting here, but maybe this was slightly less true during a time where films were less expensive to watch, relatively speaking, to purchasing power. But most mass audiences don't wish to be surprised. Like maybe you have a twist ending that within the general genre conventions that they're expecting, the plot is a surprise, but they're not looking to be shocked, right? It's the culture industry. They want to be placated, even if that's an unintended consequence, or an unintentional way that they're engaging. So yeah, not shocking to me that someone was like, we're gonna go watch a crazy sexy movie, and then it's like, this is a movie about what a post-colonial people, like what the psychological and spiritual and sexual effects of that are. And
it's like patient as shit. Like you just linger in a bunch of scenes, and like it is just,
there's lack of explanation for many things, like
I love that.
The engagement with Christianity, I think, is one of the most dynamic parts of the movie, because it allows it to exist in both a place where Christianity is like pathological or in like outside intervention, but it's also a source of community and continuity and like being saved. And the movie like doesn't really, like, Bill Gunn doesn't really try and like wrap that in a neat bow at all on any level. It's like, it's a lot of things. Many things are happening here.
Yeah. Well, let's just hit the general plot of the movie. So the movie is about a professor named Hess Green, who's an anthropologist, who's this very like well-to-do kind of bougie guy. He drives a Rolls Royce and
his house is nice and big.
A nice ass house. He's a chauffeur and an assistant, and and he is an anthropologist that specifically studies the Myrthian people,
which is fictional.
A fictional group of people in Africa who were known to be blood drinkers, and that is kind of his area of expertise. I was kind of, because I had never seen this before, so I was kind of trying to figure out where the vampire part was coming in with this extinct part of this extinct culture, and essentially, I guess we can dive right into the turning into a vampire part. He has, as an anthropologist, has several like artifacts around his house, and he also has this kind of depressed assistant named George. Is that his name? George Maida, played by Bill Gunn. And they have a couple really good scenes together. And the first one is he finds him like on the verge of suicide, and there's a great shot it's like he finds him outside the house with the noose like hanging in front of him, and most of the shot is Dwayne Jones, who plays Dr. Green, in the background, and Bill Gunn as Meta in the foreground with the noose right in front of his face.
It's seriously, the way this movie is directed is just fucking
really cool.
stunning. The foreground and like background shots, and then the number of half shots where there's usually some kind of soft focus background, and the subject of the shot, only half of their face is shown in like the leftmost or rightmost third of the frame. It's both of those kinds of shots are repeated throughout the movie, and
there's a lot of shots where like just like beautiful composition, and just hold that shot for minutes, because I feel like that one scene, the attempted suicide with the noose, is like, I don't remember if there's any cuts, but if thinking back on it, it feels like a long unbroken shot of just the foreground background noose. But that's a really cool moment. And essentially, he kind of convinces him not to hang himself, and then they kind of go back inside, and this character essentially has a break and takes this dagger, this Murthian dagger, and stabs Dr. Green, and then immediately kills himself. And so we've got basically what we think is two dead bodies, only to learn in the grossest part of the movie, and a movie that I love, a moment that I love, that Dr. Green has turned into a vampire from this dagger wound.
Yeah, and the dagger is shaped like a fang also. So there's the kind of vampiric tooth imagery is present, but in this anthropology relic way.
Yeah, it looks cool, and then he starts sucking that dude's blood up off the floor, and it's so gross. Oh my god, I love that. Have you ever seen Kronos?
Yeah.
There's another scene where, I don't know, something about just sucking blood up off the floor is like so primal and disgusting, and
it's like you would only do that if you had a deep abiding desire.
No other choice.
There is nothing but unbridled desire that will push you to lick blood off the ground.
I'm gonna put my whole fucking face on this floor and suck up the blood. It's so gross. But yeah, he finds himself with this insatiable desire for blood. It's awesome. And this movie's divided into 3 chapters, and the first 2 are fairly short, and then the last chapter is basically the back half of the movie. But the first one is called Victim, and we see that term could probably work for a few characters in the movie, both Dr. Green and I would say George in the beginning half, and then probably Ganja as well once we meet her later. But one thing I really want to talk about in this movie is the music, because the music is cool as hell. Specifically that like, do you know who did the music? Because I dug in. Yeah. So is that guy known for music outside of this? I'd never heard of this guy before.
I believe so. So his name is Sam Waymon, and he is still alive. And when I tweeted about watching Ganja Hess recently, he liked the tweet.
Hell yeah. Definitely going to tag him in future stuff.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was cool.
Yeah.
But yes, there is other music in the movie, but when the blood hunger begins to seep in and become uncontrollable for any of our characters who are struck with vampirism, there is a supposed to be kind of tribal-esque chanting that occurs, but it's
so
really, really beautiful and melodic, and it sounds like it's all women's voices to me, but it's one of my favorite parts of the movie because it's really pleasant sounding. It doesn't it is haunting because of the context in which you hear it, not because the sound itself is unpleasant.
Yeah, and what it comes to like represent throughout the movie.
Right, that's what I mean.
By the end, when you hear it coming, you know, like
right throughout, like what it means, like when it presages something bad happening or indicates that violence is going to occur that's driven by this hunger for blood. But the sound itself isn't like frightening or intended to be scary. It builds the meaning through its linkage to the visual.
Yeah. And Sam Waymon is also in the movie. He is the chauffeur, Reverend Luther Williams, who, we see him a little bit at the beginning, but then he has a fairly large scene at the end, which is really good. I love that scene. So we then move into our chapter 2.
Wait, I want to go back. We're skipping all kinds of stuff.
I'm sorry.
In the part one in The Victim, a line is said that I think speaks to the whole movie. Is the whole movie summarized in one quotation, which is where they say, "The blood of the thing is the truth of the thing."
Ooh, yeah.
And I think the intention of this line is that this hunger, this like forceful, violent desire, gets at the core of the post-colonial psychology that Dr. Hess Green has been playing with as an anthropologist, and that he has tapped into through his study of the Maiathra, and by bringing their world into his bourgeois world with the dagger. So I love that line, because it's like, it's so simple, but it just really has a very fine point, like the dagger on it, right? The blood of the thing is the truth of the thing. So once he begins to drink people's blood, we really see the core of his relationship to other humans, to his racial identity, to the status of like Black people in America vis-a-vis this like ancient society, and the connections between the current status of Black people in America and this ancient society that was snuffed out by this disease, by this half human status.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned it briefly, but I think another large part of this movie is that he is this very bougie dude that has a chauffeur and a chef. And does he have a chef? Yeah. I think he had a chef. Yeah, and a chef.
He's like Butler is the chef. He's like the driver, and then everyone else is one man playing the same.
Also, it's played by Dwayne. He is played by Dwayne Jones of Night of the Living Dead, which is like, these were his two starring roles that Dwayne Jones was ever in. And goddamn, he can carry some weight in a movie, because in both these movies, both this and Night of the Living Dead, I feel like a lot of the emotional weight of the movies rests on his shoulders, especially Night of the Living Dead. But goddamn, he's great.
Yeah, they're both really stunning performances.
Yeah. You mean him and Ganja, right?
Well, yes, but I meant his two roles. Like
his two roles. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
Ganja is
say,
amazing too.
And Bill Gunn is amazing in his role too as George.
And the other thing I'll say before we move to chapter 2 is that we mentioned that his assistant George Mehta, who's played by Bill Gunn, like attempts or is on the verge of attempting suicide by way of a noose, and they have this conversation that goes on where Dr. Hess Green is saying, like, if you kill yourself, I'm going to be blamed for it because I'm the only Black man in a white neighborhood. So there's this discussion of like race and power that is very transparent, it's very apparent. It's very straightforward. But then I think as it relates to kind of some of the psychoanalytic stuff that I was talking about in the intro, George Mehta in this part also says, kind of as he's getting down, that he feels he has a schizophrenic idea that he is both a victim and a murderer. And I think this speaks to like the fragmentation of a post-colonial psychology where he could not see himself as whole, because all he can see looking back upon himself is the lack of humanness that's reflected in the other. Like when he looks out seeking his own humanity, he looks out to see his own humanity reflected in other people. That's not what he receives in return. And so it kind of sickly validates his like depressive melancholy, and it leads to him ultimately dying. But that he's been forced into a situation where he feels that he can exist both as a victim and as a murderer simultaneously, and the fragmentation is a big piece of that.
Yeah. I don't remember, does he know what the dagger is? Is there a moment like that he knows what the dagger is and what it represents when he stabs him?
So I would say yes, because when George Maida and Dr. Hess Green are having a conversation prior to the suicide attempt, after they eat dinner, in front of a fire. They're like sitting in front of a fire conversing. They talk about the ancient society, and there is a discussion of whether or not their desire to drink blood was a need. And so they're kind of debating back and forth, and they kind of land on that it was a need. It was a drive that couldn't be denied. So I don't know if it was like explicit, like, therefore this artifact of theirs must produce this outcome. But I think it's clear that he had some
knowledge of what might happen or what could happen or what,
I think so.
He knew what ballpark they were in.
I think he's trying to force. Okay, here, not to get like so woo woo with it.
Let's get woo woo.
But you know, prior to that point in time, we really see Dr. Green, with the exception of the brief time that he's in the church at the very beginning, we mostly see him living in a white world, right? We see him looking at art, and cavorting around with really rich white people. And he lives in a really rich house. He talks about being the only black person in his neighborhood. I feel like George Maida is trying to condemn him to the half-human life of like a black male experience that he was having. Which I think it's apparent by everything that I just said before this. I'm not saying black men are half human. I'm saying that in the conception of whiteness, the definition of black male experience does not rise to the threshold of full humanity, because whiteness demanded that to justify the cruel inequities that it has perpetuated upon black men, right? But I think so I would say, like, I think that it is symbolically George Maida trying to bring Dr. Hess into his experience.
Yeah, like, well, a lot of the movie, especially in the later half, is about like the alienation feeling of being the other. So yeah, what you're saying makes sense in the sense that like almost that George resents him for not being alienated in quite the right way. Like they I don't know if that quite makes sense, but they're both like these alienated people, but Dr. Green's world, the alienation is like comfortable, I guess, is more comfy than his. And I guess he kind of wants him to see or feel that same feeling that he feels. I feel like I just talked myself into a circle.
No, I agree. I mean, I think he's trying to bridge the gap via pulling Hess to his psychological experience.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, quite literally.
Of fragmentation and alienation.
Yeah. So, and that leads into chapter 2, which is called Survival, where we basically see, I think this is probably the shortest of the chapters. It's not very long, maybe like 10, 15 minutes. And it's basically Dr. Green kind of adapting to living as a vampire. And actually, I won't even say vampire because they never say vampire in the movie. But kind of living in this world where he knows he has this insatiable need for blood. So we see him kind of pulling little gags and blood banks to steal bags of blood.
Cracking up because he's actively smoking a cigarette in his doctor's office.
Hell yeah.
His tiny doctor's office, smoking a fucking stove.
We see him steal bags of blood. And when he that doesn't do it for him anymore, we do see him with a sex worker. But I just want to point out, I love this 70s blood in movies that look like this. I can't quite describe it, but it's not quite like goopy like normal blood, and it's bright red. Like, I just love that shit.
Me too.
It's so weird looking, and it's not necessarily realistic, but it's, I don't know, it's much more like disgusting looking and more, for some reason, more gory to me to see this like bizarre like jello colored blood in like 70s movies.
It's viscous and it feels like painterly.
It's
very, speaking of, I mean, not 2018 but 1977, Suspiria, where I think about a lot of like Argento movies have that like bright red, thick as paint blood that
I love that
it
shit.
just feels like very staged, but I don't mean that as an insult. Like,
no, not at all.
You know, is maybe how I would say it. But yeah, there's not a lot here. I think, which works given what it's called, what the chapter's called, survival. I think the point is like, this is not a state that one can survive for very long.
Yeah, and I think it's also supposed to be like a juxtaposition of his life of comfort where he had everything he needed, now juxtaposed with like the everything he needs is this incredible taboo that like he needs to drink.
Right, he's thrust
blood.
into stealing, he's thrust into dive bars, he's thrust into interactions with, again, thrust, but he is propelled. There is an impetus for him to get outside of his his comfort zone and his, like you said, kind of his safe world. And that's done in that same chapter. It's juxtaposed with, we see that he has a son who has a governess, a white governess, who is he speaks French with him. They talk about his schooling, and then it's juxtaposed against him again in a sleazy bar trying to find someone that he can kill for blood.
Yeah, and I think again it goes to the like alienation of the other, where like he's still living in this like upper crusty world, but living with himself, like being a literal like bottom feeder, like sucking blood, licking it up off the floor.
He's a victim and a murderer. He has nothing left to do but confront this, again, like this half-life that he's been doomed to.
Yeah, and I think it's also in the survival section where we meet Ganja.
No, it's in part 3.
Is it in part 3? I couldn't remember So do we have anything else on part 2? It is the shortest chunk.
I think we can move into when our diva, our queen.
Hell yeah. So after George is killed and his body is unceremoniously stuffed in the like walk-in freezer of George's house, his wife Ganja shows up looking for him, and there's immediately like a spark between her and Hess, kind of like a flirty, kind of like coy cat and mouse spark at the beginning, but they're like immediately into each other. And this shit gets sexy as hell.
Yeah, and it's also, once again, a beautiful shot. Just like care put into the composition, where I literally like drew a little picture in my notes because it was like so beautiful of when they have this first sexual encounter, and his head is in like the far right corner and his body is pointed towards the center of the frame, and she leans on him, and so there's this foreshortening effect where their heads are big and the rest of their body is smaller, and they're just surrounded by like rich, thick ornamental rugs, and it's just like a really opulent scene. And it's something that in if it was a throwaway dime a dozen film, it just would have been like a straight on shot where they were centered, and instead it's like this really well composed moment that just kind of allows their connection to linger. And it also has a sense, because of the foreshortening, of like that they are each other's prey. And just wow, what a beautiful movie.
It's great. Yeah. Oh fuck, the idea, what I was about to say just flew right out of my brain. Oh, I remember what it was.
Dun, dun.
And also with the with the introduction of Ganja, I feel like that's when the kind of pacing of the movie slows down even more, and we kind of get like these long scenes of just being with them without a lot of like plot developments. And again, I don't mean that in like a derisive way. I mean that in like a as positive as I can make it way, because I love a movie that will just simmer in its characters, and I feel like most of the back half of the movie is like them leaving certain things unspoken and unsaid and just like sitting in the moment together. And we get these great sex scenes as well throughout, without being too crass. But yeah, these are two sexy people and doing some great sex scenes.
Yeah, and
Dwayne Jones had to be like 60 at this time, right? He's like an older dude, is he not?
Dwayne Jones, this movie came out in the 70s, was filmed in the early 70s.
But I thought he was like old when Night of the Living Dead came out.
think so. We'll confirm that. But also,
this might just be like a version of like when you just see anybody from the 70s, you're like, God damn, he's like 50, and you're like, he's 27.
Yeah, not wearing sunscreen, smoking a lot of cigarettes will do that to you.
Oh my God, this is about to be really.
But I think that part of that effect, not that him looking old, but the simmering effect is that they Hess is experiencing immortality anew, and this is him like delving into the fact that he doesn't have to be in a rush.
Yeah.
So we're kind of experiencing that slowdown with him, that there's a woman that he's kind of intercepted that's entered his life, and he just wants to kind of like hang out there. And so we get to hang out there with them for a while. But we get pretty much the immediate sense that Ganja is not just trying to hang out. She says straight up, when he asks her, what do you want? She says money. Like there is no bones about it. She's very explicit. We then also see pretty early on in this bit where Archie, who is Hess's butler, she asks Archie about the wine cellar, which is where we know that George Meta's body is. And Archie denies, he doesn't want you to go there. You can go anywhere in the house, but you can't go there. And
that scene is really funny with him trying to
goes there. So she has a drive and a hunger at this point that is not blood motivated because she's not yet a vampire, but is kind of, I think, intended to be parallel.
For sure.
To his. Did you discover how old he was?
Yeah, this old ass motherfucker, Dwayne Jones, when he was in Ganja and Hess, was 1 year older than I am now.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You old ass bitch.
Old motherfucker. My bad, Dwayne. Well, he's like bald in it, and he's got a beard, which I feel like makes him look older than he did in Night of the Living Dead.
Well, I mean, he's definitely older than that. That came out in the early 60s, right?
So, 68. So it was 5 years later. Okay. Yeah, so it wasn't
so
even.
He was like mid-20s then, and now.
But looking at a picture of him from Night of the Living Dead, like he aged a lot in those 5 years, because here's a picture of him from Night of the Living Dead. He's got a full head of hair, and this one he's like,
this motherfucker's out there chain smoking cigarettes. If you're smoking a cigarette in a doctor's office, even fictionally,
you are not
you're
doing well.
Taking some years to the cheek.
Well, my bad, Dwayne. I thought you were like 50 in this movie.
But he looks very hot. It's not an indication.
Yeah. Let me point out that I originally said he was old by saying he looks really hot for an old dude in this movie before learning he was in his mid-30s.
So I will say, while we were paused so that I could run to the restroom, my dad texted me about a airplane pilot that tried to shut off the engines on a plane midair because he was on shrooms. So
your dad was on this plane?
No, Jesus Christ, no.
Oh, okay.
He just sent me this news. I was like, why is my dad texting me at 8:45 p.m.? It's a little later than
I feel like I saw this. There was a recording that came out of like the other pilot like talking him out of it or something.
Let's just say I am already extremely anxious plane
Me too, man.
flyer.
I hate it.
I have to be on legally prescribed drugs to do it. If that happened to me, I would never fly again. Like I would be like, all the dreams that I have of like going to places that require flying, I'd be like, sorry life, throw them away, we're never doing that again.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but a few weeks ago I talked about this show that I was watching called The Telemarketers. And I had watched, there was 3 episodes, and I think at that point I had watched the first 2, and so I hadn't talked about the finale. But in The Telemarketers there's this like folk hero of a guy named Patrick J. Pespis, who was in the this telemarketer show is told over the span of like 15 years, and in the early years he had a heroin addiction and was like falling asleep at his desk but could still make these fucking phone calls, and then like he got cleaned up as the years went on and became the guy that was like, what we were doing was pretty fucked up, like let's look into this, and was kind of the driving force into this being eventually made. But there's a bit where like it's more close to the present when now they're not just telemarketing guys. So the one guy's got some pull and can get interviews and shit, and they're going to score a huge interview. and they got to fly to Florida to do it. And Patrick J. Pespis has never been on a plane, and they literally get to the gate, and he's like, super even-tempered guy, very kindly, and he gets to the gate. He's like, "Nope, fuck you, fuck off, I fucking hate this," and he just storms off, and it just cuts to them in a car on the freeway driving the rest of the way. And I was like, "That's the most relatable thing
I very much relate to that. The most medieval belief I have, I mean that in a little M way, but also, frankly, probably a big M way. Yeah. Is that like we just weren't meant to do that?
No, it's against God's will.
I don't believe in God, but it's against God's will. Speaking of things that are against God's will, let's get back into Ganja and Hess.
Vampires. Hell yeah. Oh, that was very relevant because we've got some wedding bells in our future. Because as their relationship blossoms, I was trying to think of a vampiric turn of phrase for blossoms, but I couldn't do it on the fly.
As the blood seeps.
As the blood seeps. I'm just gonna use that as just in standard conversation and watch people's confused faces. Anyways, as the blood seeps, I was walking. But yeah, they are falling more and more in love, and eventually
they're going to get married. Right before they get married,
they are.
I will say, Ganja and Hess have a conversation where Ganja kind of monologues about her mom.
Uh-huh.
And I thought this was another great example of Bill Gunn laying these seeds of this kind of like the fucked up psychological ramifications of being the downtrodden and cast aside in an unequal society.
Uh-huh.
Because Ganja monologues about quote unquote being a disease, about being unloved and unwanted by her mother, being accused of being a slut. And she's not a vampire yet. I mean, we'll talk about that in a moment. But it's just another example of like when you look out seeking wholeness, you look out looking to be validated and affirmed by those in your social milieu, that what is reflected back is like violence and cruelty and fragmentation. So I thought it was interesting of like the ways in which it's not just vampirism that represents this like social pathology that Black people in America have been subjected to. It's like he finds other ways to pull that in and represent it in the movie. But so anyway, they get married.
They do. And at this point, this is a half vampire marriage. But I was going to see if you wanted to take this. You look like you were gearing up. So
I was just going to say
notes.
before the next step, she just looks so beautiful, and she's holding birds of paradise, which is like such an unusual like floral arrangement to have, and it's just like sharp and tropical against
really
the
cool
white lace and like the beautiful greenery of his estate. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And then we see a body.
We do see a body
being dragged.
Hell yeah. Wait, is this the body of which body is this?
It's the person that she has killed, I believe. But it's like the vows continue. Again, one of the other cool things
this is the person that comes back.
Yes,
right?
One of the other cool things that Bill Gunn does in terms of like artfulness in his direction is a lot of crossfading, where there's like the vocals attached with a different scene are playing over another action, and it kind of like cuts. There's cross-cutting, and it cuts back and forth between two different scenes, and the audios from the two different scenes are also cut across each other. It becomes
like this discordant, but like really cool.
Well, it has the effect of knowing that these two things are happening not literally simultaneously, but their meanings and their functions and their intentions are wrapped up in each other.
Yeah. But yeah, after their wedding, I almost called him Bill because we've said Bill Gunn so many times. Dr. Green turns Ganja into a vampire, and we get some really cool shots, specifically the one with her face with the blood screaming in the field.
Yeah, again, her
awesome.
Like the half of her face.
Ooh, that's what I gotta make the episode image. I had found a different image that I thought was kind of cool, but I gotta make that one.
Oh yeah, it's an iconic moment. I also think something I wrote in my notes in this part is like, what is it to be sane in a crazy world? Like, what's the, like, in a universe in which the person you love is a vampire, you have willingly become a vampire. All of the fucked up shit about America in the 1970s is happening. Like, is there any response? Like, the most sane response is a fucking rebel yell while blood is dripping from your mouth. You know what I mean? Like,
it makes sense.
It actually makes perfect sense for the situation as it stands. And I love one of my favorite moments in the movie. They're lying in bed together, and he says to her, do you still think I'm psychotic, or you think I'm still psychotic, or something like that? And she is just like, huge beautiful smile on her face, and she says, of course.
yeah, that's really good.
You know, it's like,
they're really, they play off really well together, and it's so good. And so she kills her first victim, who we see, that's the body that we see being dragged. And while all this is happening, Dr. Green is kind of having this crisis of conscience, this crisis of faith, basically starting to view himself as the evil that, the Christian church that he grew up around, I guess not necessarily in, but around, this kind of evil that he'd always heard about. And we have this long monologue in the church of his chauffeur, Reverend Luther Williams, giving this really impassioned sermon. And again, another like mostly unbroken shot, composed really beautifully, with this guy just delivering this monologue. Like, I love that church scene.
Same.
It's great.
And I love he talks about being high on Jesus. There's also dialogue around this part. I think it's just before the church scene, but I can't quite remember, where they talk about. No, it is just before it, and it's Hess. He's reading Myathra related writings, and he says destruction of love is destruction of life. And I think that is such a beautiful moment, because I think there's like an inability to connect that comes from your life being dominated by a hunger and by desire that's outside of your control. Then there's also like the layer of he has like destroyed her life seemingly in service of love. There's like a couple of different, I think, interpretations there, but I think it ultimately speaks to like the crisis of faith that he's having, is that it seemed like in the wake of his turn to vampirism after George Manda stabs him, that Ganja seemed to be like she could be his savior, and that he's realized it's not possible. It's not actually reconciling.
Not only that, but I have now brought
her
to my
the same
level.
Curse. Yeah, exactly. So I love that, and then it cuts to this being high on Jesus monologue.
Hell yeah, so good.
And it's so good.
I also, have you seen The Sweet Blood of Jesus?
Yes, I have.
Okay, I have not seen it. That's for those that might not know, Spike Lee remade this movie in the early 2010s after doing a Kickstarter campaign, which was weird. That movie was partially funded on Kickstarter, which I thought was a very weird thing for like an A-list director to crowdfund a movie. Yeah. But yeah, what are you gonna do? But watching, I had not seen it, but when that church scene came on, I was like, oh, this is the scene that Spike saw and was like, I'm gonna do that movie. This is the Spike scene to me.
So the thing I'll say about The Sweet Blood of Jesus is the scenes that happen with like the man that Ganja had, like not Hess, but like the external party that she has, like the first kill, or however you want to interpret that, is a woman.
A woman, yeah.
And I do think that there's something interesting there in terms of like exploring kind of the queer monstrous that we've talked about before. The rest of it, kind of similar to the Old Boy remake he made, is like a shot for shot. It's not a shot for shot remake in that I shouldn't say that, because this movie has some very unique shots in it, but it's like a setting for setting, like a staging for staging remake.
It doesn't justify its own existence for being remade. Yeah.
And like Ganja and Hess is such a unique visual vision. Like it's such a good artistic weird movie that it's just like, why would you?
And if you're going to, you need to do something like completely wild with the remake that's completely apart from the original, I guess.
Yeah, and I also think there's something about like the anthropological aspect of it that doesn't work as well when it's transported contemporarily, because the movie is set contemporarily. It's not set in the 70s like Spike Lee's
I didn't
version.
know that.
It's in a very
like,
nice like contemporary house.
Who plays the Hess character?
I don't recall like either of the. I don't think that they're terribly famous. But it's not. I think it's worth watching if you really liked Ganja and Hess. But I just wouldn't say that it's one of Spike Lee's like standouts. And to me, I would choose Ganja and Hess by Bill Gunn every day of the week as the better movie.
Yeah. Oh, it's Stephen Tyrone Williams, who was, I believe, the assistant on that show, The Nick. Did you ever watch that with Clive Owen?
Oh, yes.
Is he's the like the one that's like basically having to clean up all of his like heroin addicted disaster surgeries.
Yes,
That's like having to
yeah. You're right. Yeah, I just think it's not. They're not.
They're not like big like mega stars or whatever.
Yeah, and I do think I want to say there was. Yeah, like Rami Malek is in it briefly.
Oh really? That's interesting.
It's not bad, but I just would never choose it over this version of it ever, I would say.
Yeah.
And maybe if I had seen it if I had watched it first, I might have a different take on it. But I mean, I would say there's a reason it's not known to be one of Spike Lee's standouts.
Yeah. The Kickstarter thing. That's the reason, at least in my head.
Seriously, let's go punch every single studio exec. Like, just give them the goddamn money. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
I would rather watch a bad Spike Lee movie any day of the week than like half the shit they're giving people money for. A pox on their households.
Do you know what was more infuriating than Spike Lee doing Kickstarter was when fucking Zach Braff did a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I don't remember what that goddamn movie was called. I was just so annoyed that he did a crowdfunding thing for his...
He needed a hobby to pick up while he was dating Florence Pugh.
He dated Florence Pugh?
Oh, yes.
They're not still dating, right?
They dated for like a hot minute. I'm pretty sure they were dating like when that happened, though.
That sucks.
He did that.
I hate that.
You know,
for her.
Right, exactly.
Oh my God, every night he would have been like, hey, I'm going to let you listen to this mediocre Shins album. It's going to change your life. I hate Garden State so much.
Damn.
I feel like we maybe talked about this before.
You don't have to start fucking throwing the Shins under the bus.
I like the Shins.
I'm fine with them.
I did call them mediocre.
Yeah, you called that album mediocre. That album's good, okay?
Wait, which one is the one that he says will change your life in Garden State? Is it O Inverted World?
I think so.
Yeah, that one's good. I shouldn't have called it mediocre. That was more of my anger.
Garden State mediocre. The Shins.
Yeah, that was more of my anger at Garden State than the Shins and that horrible fucking line in Garden State that I hate so much. The Shins will change your life.
Yeah, I think so. But also, Shoots Too Narrow was like, that was my shit during high school.
Yeah, I love Shoots Too Narrow
and also
too,
Wincing the Night Away. I think I dropped off after that.
I'm gonna take full. I was completely.
Apparently, they released an album in 2018. That's crazy. Did you know that?
I don't know. I was gonna say I do not like Garden State. I was trying to shit on Garden State, and the Shins took a few strays in that one, so I do apologize. But before we end this episode, I do want to talk about the last moment because that's really cool, which is where Hess has now died and Ganja is looking out the window.
Well, so we should say he has essentially.
We didn't talk about how he dies.
He has completed suicide via Christianity.
By after being like feeling that he is committed an evil that there is no redemption for. He kills himself by standing in the shadow of the cross, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to find. It's foreshadowed earlier.
Yeah, because he says...
Oh, it's in the song. In the song that Waymon sings at the very beginning, he says, slaves could not die unless the shadow of the cross, an implement of torture, touched their darkened heart. And then he says that because Christ did not come, they were fated to wander until the Christians came.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I think this is kind of sick, is because I mean sick both in like a nasty but also in a sick nasty kind of way, is that a twisted way, is that he is dying at the hands of Christianity, which is both about Christianity being fucked up, but also about how once the notion is introduced to you that you need to be saved, the only thing that can save you is like that solve that they've introduced. Like, I just, once again, there's like a lot of possible layers and interpretations, and the relationship of Christianity to the colonized is not a straight line as depicted by Bill Gunn. But that shot is fucking gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
Just like a cross hanging from the ceiling and a lonely bulb swinging, and just the shadow that, again, was foreshadowed earlier projected onto him.
There is one story of Christianity being attempting to colonize an area that I really like. I think this story is really great. And that is that story from a few years ago where that fucking guy tried to go preach the gospel to that untouched tribe and got fucking murked up on the beach.
Yeah. I think there's a documentary about that coming out soon.
I can't wait. Oh my God. Yeah. I love that shit. I'm sorry. My dad always gets mad at me when I talk about how much that story is like kicks ass, but I'm like, no,
it does kick ass. If people's,
he's like, a man died, and I'm like, yeah, being an asshole.
So,
like, what do you?
There is something to. Okay, this is obviously a digression, but I think there's something to be said about, like, he knew not just that was a risk, but that it was a high probability. Yeah. And so there's two options. One, he wanted to be a martyr. Yeah. In which case, how can you be mad? Because that's literally the act that he was intending to engage in. Or two, he thought that like the power of Christ in him was so great, so much better than anybody else, which is so solipsistic and like fucking tortured narcissism.
I think it's that one.
Like both things are silly. It's like, I'm sorry, sometimes people walk their way into their own grave. What are you supposed to do about it?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, he had gone like the day before and ran because they almost killed him then, and then came back and got immediately killed. Sometimes the news is beautiful, and we love that.
Sometimes you set your hand on a hot oven, and then you say...
and it's hot.
And then you say, I'm going to do that again, and then you burn your fucking hand. What are you supposed to do?
But yeah, so after Hess dies, it's Ganja is left with basically all of his riches. His house is kind of like his literal like immortality, and we see her kind of looking out the window with a kind of wry smile, and then the first dude that she is he dead? Is he now a vampire, or this is just or is he not completely dead?
I think he's just simply not dead. I think that her interest in securing power and safety for herself suggests to me she would not immediately turn a dude.
Right. That's
like,
what
she's not looking for a forever companion.
Yeah, and just the way he comes back, which is butt ass naked, kind of like raving, wild, like desperate, is not the look of a man who is has a new lease on life. It is somebody who's like scared shitless, and then her kind of like stoic face in the window is like really haunting too. Awesome ending. I love that shit.
Right? It's a banger.
That's honestly to me the scariest part of the movie is that dude running butt ass naked, like terrified, straight at the camera at the end is really cool. It is a banger. Yeah, this was a cool one. Do we have anything that we want to add to Ganja and Hess? I would do a Armin White, but I think we realized that if the movie didn't come out before like 2006, Armin White did not review it.
Unless it is like a,
capital M movie. Yeah.
No, I mean, I would just say that this is often a movie that I suggest to people when sometimes, I have friends that like horror, but maybe
I
have friends that maybe like horror but aren't as well ventured. They just don't dig into it more. This is one that I recommend as something that if they want to get into like a little artier horror that I don't think is completely like inaccessible. It's not super long.
it's not necessarily scary. It's horrific in parts, but not necessarily scary either. Yeah,
it has like interesting things to chew on, even if you're not interested in like all this like fucking Fanon rambling I'm doing at the beginning. I think there is just something you can pick up notes of like the lasting impact of racism and how vampirism is in some way intended to be an allegory for like the status of an ancient African society in contrast with the status of Black Americans in the United States contemporarily to that time, even if all like the nuances or whatever aren't dug into. So if you listen to this and you haven't watched it, I encourage you to watch it. I do think it is something that's like fun to watch with other people. Like I would recommend that. You've still got time in the month of October, so if you're trying to knock some other horror movies
and it's free on Canopy.
Yes, it's free on Canopy. Definitely
I don't have my Canopy account set up, so I paid $2.99 for it, but I saw that it was on Canopy. I don't have a library card, so
it's okay. We gotta fix that because like seriously, you can do that in like 2 minutes online.
You can do it online?
You can do it totally online.
I'm stuck like boomer brain. I'm like, I gotta go all the way to the library.
What caused me to do it initially a couple of years ago? Canopy. I was like, I want to watch this movie on Canopy, and I was like, let's see if I can figure this out now.
I should have assumed that I can do that, but my brain was like, I gotta go all the way to the library.
No, they do mail you your library card, and that takes a week or whatever. But no, seriously, you can like generate all of that online within minutes and sign up for Canopy ASAP. So,
fuck yeah.
I would say watch this fucking movie, watch it with a friend. Get Canopy, get a library card.
These are all threats, by the way.
Read The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon if you had it. You know, maybe don't read Lacan. I feel like you don't need to read Lacan if you hadn't.
See
it's
that
fine.
Daily Wire Snow White movie when it comes out.
And laugh at it with us.
We're definitely watching that one
for sure.
Yeah.
Give candy to children. Turn off your fucking porch light if you're not going to give candy to children. Remember to change your air filter.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Refill the wiper fluid in your car.
I love this. God, I can't think of any common household things that I can.
I say that one especially
about.
Because I didn't. Mine ran out and I didn't, and now they're like clogged, and I have to figure out how to fix that. It's fucking annoying. So don't let that happen to you. Okay, let me be a warning. Let me be your Halloween horror warning.
Oh my God, I'm so spoiled now because for the first time ever, a couple years ago, I bought a car from a dealership, and it was used, but it was like really, really new. It had 400 miles on it, so I got like the full warranty. I ain't got to do shit for this thing. I take it in once a year. They give me all that shit. It's beautiful.
It lasts you a year? Your wiper fluid lasts you a year?
No, but I'll make do with the last few months, and then they'll fill it up.
I refill mine all the time. Why is mine clogged? Okay, so what we're learning is I have problems that are unique. Maybe it's because my car has 180,000 miles on it. That's bonkers. Okay, so everybody pray for House Prius.
Hell yeah. Man, that thing's chugging,
So that's a list. You've got a long list.
Yes.
Also, if you dress up for Halloween and it's really cool, please fucking at me on Twitter because I want to see it.
And Sam Waymon, too. And at us and Sam Waymon, and maybe he'll retweet it like. Yes, I would also like to see your Halloween costume. No, I don't want to say. Although I probably already told you.
Yeah, you already told me.
Oh, I already told you. I'm going to be a Frankenstein monster.
I'm excited. That's obviously, you should have brought that up while we were talking about you watching all these Frankenstein movies. But
Yeah, that is kind of the reason why it was on my brain. But also for work, we're doing like group dress up. I told you this, but we're going to be Kins and Barbies. So I'm excited to see how that goes over.
This is the first time, this is how you can tell I've been in a depressive state. This is the first time that I can remember. So maybe ever, honestly, I don't know. Maybe, probably not. 2013, I probably didn't celebrate Halloween. That was the worst year of my life. But I legit don't have any like costume plans. The good news is that because of all my other psychotic years of Halloween celebration, I just own things in my house that I will figure out. You know, I have
slap it together.
I keep part of my closet is just various Halloween things. I always love a good Halloween pun. Like I have an egg sweater, and then I have like little devil horns. So a couple of years ago I went as like deviled egg, you know.
Okay.
Here's
one.
Okay.
The egg.
Okay.
A revolutionary hat. Revolution War hat.
I was like, what revolution? The U.S. Revolutionary War.
And a red, and a red coat, and you could be Eggs Benedict. Is that a good one?
You know what? If I could find like a 3-point hat.
I might still have one from when I dressed up as a tea partier a few years ago.
It also kind of depends. This is the burden of a Floridian Halloween, right. I will say for our non-Florida folks, is there are some Halloweens where I've created costumes
how hot am I
that are slutty as hell. And I'm like, it'll be fine. It's 85 degrees while I'm making this all month of October. And then it's like 30 degrees on Halloween out of nowhere. And then there's many years where it's the opposite happens, where I'm like, no, I'm going to plan for this. I'm going to wear a coat. I'm going to build a coat, not make the coat, but like use one of my coats intentionally as part of the costume. And then it's 75 degrees on Halloween. So like, you know, don't move to Florida. Add to the list. Add to the to-do list. Don't move to Florida.
That was last year at our Halloween party. I went as Mike Lindell, and within like 10 minutes, the wig, the fake mustache, the shirt, everything was off, and I was just a guy in khaki pants for the rest of the night.
That's true. It was hot. At
so
Craig's
hot.
Craig and his wife's Halloween party last year, I went as Pinhead.
That shit was dope.
Where I glued
cool.
what I decided
you had
to
a lot
do,
of stuff on too, though.
Yes,
and it was like latexy.
The jacket. I wore a like black latex jacket that was very hot, but I glued pearls to my face and like drew the squares rather than like trying to have stuff stick off my face. I was pretty proud of that. It was a good look, but I don't know that I'm gonna be able to turn something as impressive this time. So, you know, we'll see. We'll definitely report back.
Yeah, we'll keep you on tenterhooks.
Yes.
Tinter?
On Tinderhooks?
I thought it was Tinter for some reason. Tinter.
I'm pretty sure it's Tinderhooks.
Well, you should be a Tinderhook for Halloween.
To-do list number 69.
Tinter.
Clarify for us what the phrase is. Is it Tinderhooks? Is it Tinterhooks?
It's Tinter.
Oh, you ruined the expense, Craig.
Oh, sorry. Still clarify, though. Still clarify.
Or make an argument for another interpretation, you know? We're open to it.
And our next episode...
What? Let's wait to hold off because I want to talk to you about that.
Okay. So next episode will be a surprise.
Bye-bye.
So we'll get you next time. No, I was doing the same thing. Crosstalk.